Today's discussions are centred on the forthcoming art installation project that will take place in the Great Court here at UQ, entitled Courting Blackness, Recalibrating Knowledge in the Sandstone University. Curated by Adjunct Professor Fiona Foley, Courting Blackness will bring cutting-edge Indigenous artworks in sculpture, fabric, poster and multimedia into the Great Court. Contemporary works designed to enter a creative visual dialogue with the UQ's academic community. Participating artists include Michael Cook, Carla Dickens, Natalie Harkin, Archie Moore and Ryan Presley, both of whom are joining us today. All of these artists are nationally and internationally renowned for artworks that stimulate thought and debate about concepts of nationhood and the ongoing problem of unresolved sovereignty in Australia. Fiona Foley believes that the ambition that currently drives many Aboriginal artists is to challenge notions of who we are as Australians.
What I like about Courting Blackness is it reframes our Aboriginality in this place in really bold, profound ways. I'm really excited seeing the Aboriginal flags, and it's, to me, is a recognition of the sovereignty of the hundreds of Aboriginal tribes who claim this land in Queensland, and it's about saying that we still exist, we're still here, our connections to country is still here. We are not a dying race. We are still here. The work around the notes I find really fascinating because it's bringing new stories. It's making recognisable Aboriginal people's contribution to Australian history, politics, society, and locating it on money and on those words change. It makes us think about what is the true value of those contributions. What value do we place on those, and how are they recognised in society more broadly?
The discipline of political science centrally revolves around the concept of power. We have subdisciplinary interests in the area of international relations, in Australian and Queensland politics, in development studies, in peace and conflict resolution, and in political theory. I teach in political theory, and I'm very committed to first-year teaching. So the 17 and 18-year-olds of this university are people who I spend a lot of time with. I teach a large first-year course in both first and second semester. In second semester, there will be various members of staff from my department who will be engaging with the project. My own idea about engaging with the project, so in second semester I teach a course called Passionate Encounters. It's basically an introduction to political concepts course. So we look at concepts like citizenship, rights, diversity, democracy, justice, freedom, all of those key concepts in political theory. We engage with the canon of political theory, and we engage critically with that canon. And also, because of who I am, I'm not very interested in that canon per se. I'm interested in how that canon might be lived out, experienced, challenged, brought into focus or not in daily life. So one of the things that we do in that course is we engage with the lived experiences of gender, race and sexuality. This course has always, well, for the last 5 years, has involved a component where students watch films or television programs made by Indigenous people. They are then asked to relate or to describe what's going on in the film, to relate it to key concepts being discussed in the course, to the canon of political theory. And then they're also required to describe their emotional response to the film or the television program. And I found that last component as being by far the most interesting aspect. So they're asked to describe their emotional thoughts and their physical responses to the film, and to discuss this in class and to write this as part of their assessment exercise. What I'm going to do for the Courting Blackness project is to require students in this course, the 200 students in this course, to engage with one or more of the artworks in the Courting Blackness, to relate it to some of the political concepts being discussed in the course, to describe the artwork, to relate it to political concepts, and then to discuss their emotional response.
You know, the sort of concept that I addressed for myself, and in some ways this is these ideas that I've written down are reflective ideas that I've sort of given to myself, so I'll share those with you. But the initial question is, given that Courting Blackness is not in the museum, it's not initiated by us, it's not developed under our auspices, and yet I've been a strong supporter of it, and I continue to be, and the museum will provide some financial assistance to it. We hope that we'll provide or host the opening event and maybe some symposia and seminar associated with it too. So where does it fit for us? How does it work for us? So what I'd like to do is just read these ideas to you, and they start at a fairly basic level. All works of art at some level or another inherently possess the intention to communicate. With this in mind, we're automatically discussing the idea of the author, the receiver, and the work of art as a catalyst in a process of communication. Of all the works of visual production loosely called art, museums of any standing focus only on a very tiny sector of that production. That which we're concerned with is selected by us because we believe that it is socially and historically and aesthetically and materially significant. Thus, along with the intention to communicate is the hope that we will influence or alter or change people. The ideas of museum and building are fundamentally connected. You know, we consider the art museum as a thing, a building, a place. And I see the museum's building as a consistent and important base. However, our mission is not defined within or limited to the building. We're beginning to consider all of the university spaces and properties as our context, and over time you'll see spaces across the campuses activated by our exhibitions. Courting Blackness is occurring for us at a wonderful time, and we're very grateful to Fiona Foley and Fiona Nicol for their willingness to involve us and to allow us to adopt to a degree their project within our mission. Every exhibition we present begs to open one's mind and pleads for empathy, compassion, and a willingness to take on board the issues that are being addressed. Every exhibition we mount addresses diversity at the granular level, and many address it at the broader socio-political level. Courting Blackness contains at its heart fundamental questions of diversity and thus those larger dissonances of communication. It stands as a challenge to convention, and it meets the museum's mission broadly and deeply.
In the Bachelor of Creative Arts, the students in their first year course have always undertaken an assignment where they had to look specifically at the locationality of the city of Brisbane and their own positionality in that particular city. And so in the past, they've gone on ghost tours because Brisbane is purportedly the third most haunted city in the world. And what I was really trying to get at was not the kind of hokey aesthetic of the ghost tour, but rather the incredibly complex and often violent history of the city, both in terms of colonization and before and after. But also thinking about the concept of ghosts more specifically. And my students use the French theorist Derrida and his concept of hauntology, the hauntological. We are in haunted spaces. And to kind of break it down, the idea of hauntology is only through the ghosts of the past, which surround us all the time, can we understand our present. And I love that idea, and I love the thought of this space being used in that way. It is a haunted space. It's a layered space, which is to repeat what Jason said earlier today, which really struck me. I like to think of Courting Blackness as a palimpsest, so a layered space. We're writing over the past, but we have to look through and see. And I think the agency of the artists is to do that, to reshape the space specifically. So I'm hoping the students will be able to engage with courting blackness and this art in a way that they had engaged with the city before, to really explore the concepts of locationality and positionality and who are we, where are we from, where are we going. As a researcher, I am a drama historian and a queer theorist, and I am particularly interested in all the work, but in the work of Carla Dickens, who will be having a film projected on the Sandstone. And it's one of the films is The Honey and the Bunny. And The Honey and the Bunny features an Indigenous drag queen and the Rabbitohs mascot who fall madly in love in Red Fern in Sydney. And it's an incredible piece because she's completely repositioning the rabbit and the Rabbitohs mascot as a symbol of agency for indigeneity. Whereas we might read the rabbit typically as a symbol of colonial occupation, she's shifted it completely and it becomes a queer totem, and I love that idea. So the other important thing, I think, is when we think about queer theory, when it developed, of course, it was all about identity politics, I'm more oppressed than you, that narrative, which I think is tiresome. But I think that we can constructively and productively apply queerness to this particular project, not in terms of sexuality, but rather in terms of not having to choose. To me, queerness is ambivalence, and I think there's agency in ambivalence because it means I can be this and that. I am here and there. This is my positionality because I'm not choosing, and I think that's what's so exciting about this particular project. It's not the this of the Forgan Smith, it's not the that of the art, it's the gap between. It's that tension that's taking place. And I think that's something that we can mine. I think it's something that we can unpack. And I think that it really extends concepts of indigeneity into a queer form that hopefully we can learn a lot more about each other, I guess. Thanks.
This idea of making Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander architecture and experience of place part of the normal practice of what architects know about is I think, a really important thing. And I think Courting Blackness will help us to do this in a few ways. It'll challenge the orthodoxy of the site because the Great Court is an extremely resonant space. It speaks to us of the origins of the university, and the Forgan Smith building has a whole history that's been written about it that didn't include much discussion of the site and who owned the site prior, all those sort of things that we'd normally consider when we think about a building. We haven't really thought about that too much in terms of the university, but they're important things to consider, and I think bringing these artworks in here brings those questions to the fore. Does the architecture respond to this? Can art and architecture work together in a really productive, kind of challenging way? And how can we show that to our students? Because obviously architecture is a very permanent thing for a long time, but there's things that you can do to that can make it more resonant and bring it into the 21st century by placing things next to it that will challenge it and make it answer some questions about its own origins. So this idea of place knowledge and site, I think, will be really important, and we're hoping to have some studio projects where students will be able to come and analyse the artworks and look at the Great Court as a whole and see how these things are fitting together. We're hoping to sort of build this knowledge of students so that they're considering not just these more standard kind of site as what's given there in terms of its physical state, but the social and historical context of it. And this whole idea of art and architecture working together to create a new kind of tension and dialogue, I think, will be really important. So we're really excited about it, and we're looking forward to thinking about how we can use it in our courses. Thanks.
There's a whole lot of interesting points that have come out of this panel, and I'd just like to encapsulate them and perhaps to end with some general broad thoughts about what this project is in the University of Queensland and perhaps what it means more broadly nationally for universities and for the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians on this land. Cam talked about the importance for this institution of art that is socially, historically, material and aesthetically significant. and how when it's combined and assembled together, that this can unsettle viewers and should unsettle viewers. He talked about the exhibition as a visual speech act. And that this speech act can sensitise us to the spaces we inhabit and how context charge works and how works energise contexts, and that the spaces can activate works in different ways when they're outside the museum space, and that this is certainly going to happen, and it will use visual culture to highlight the dissonances of communication in really productive ways. And I just, in a sense, came back to the beginning of our discussions today with the shoes and the connection of the shoe to the ground. And I think it's so moving in that sense that it is the ground, it is the land, it's that we share here, it's that we pass through, it's that which has been walked on over the thousands and the thousands and the thousands and the thousands of the years. It's that which brings our ancestors and us together through this project.
We often use these this kind of historical facts as sort of tools rather than engaging with them emotionally. So we do get students saying, oh, they even sort of come to my door and say, Kelly, what can you tell me about the Aboriginal history of South Brisbane? I need to know it now for my project. And so it's just sort of material that you might draw on so that you can do a better project rather than really thinking about the history or thinking about the consequences of that. So I think that this is a really great project. So rather than saying, okay, I need to know the history, I need to know the names of the traditional owners quickly and all this sort of just material that's out there historically for anyone to sort of grab and use, it will help students to think about things in a more critical and deep way and think about the consequences of colonialism and think about how to really engage with those consequences architecturally rather than just as base material that you just kind of acquire. And I think that's the challenge for architecture, because we see lots of projects at the moment talking about, oh, I'm going to use the Aboriginal history of the site in some way, but often it's not really engaging with the consequences of colonialism or what that might mean for the building or the people or any of that kind of stuff. It's just stuff that you could acquire and use, and I think that's where art will be great to unpack that sort of thing.
I think we need to recognise that UQ is a fundamentally staid, conservative, 100-year-old institution that has very clear ideas of itself. So to put confronting, challenging art up in a public space, in the heart of the institution, I think perhaps for a lot of people sitting here that doesn't seem like much, but I think from where UQ is and where it has come from, I think that's a really impressive leap for UQ to make, and I like to think that this step by UQ, this step by us all, especially by the academics who spoke about how they'll engage with this in their courses, is a really important step towards directing Australia to a future where our history is openly discussed, where we do talk about the very violent colonial Aboriginal history, and that it's recent. You know, that violence is recent. It wasn't 200 years ago. It wasn't settler violence. You know, it happened in a lot of our lifetimes. You know, there are, and I think that's what we need to be reminded of, and some of the artwork that to reconfigure how Australia might be different if it had a different history.